Hi, I'm Chow Clips, and today I wanted to talk to you about how to improve your solo RPG play. This was inspired by Matt Jackson's most recent video. Now, if you're not familiar with Matt Jackson, he has a fantastic YouTube channel. His White Box solo series is what kind of got me inspired to start making my own actual plays. And he's also been a long-time member of the OSR community as well. He recently released a video on how to get started in solo RPGs. And I've had numerous requests for a similar type of video, but the primary reason why I haven't made something like that is I'm no expert when it comes to this stuff. I've played some solo RPGs, but it's worth keeping in mind that I'm not just new to the solo RPG hobby, I'm new to the RPG hobby in general. I've started playing RPGs maybe 2 years ago, so keep that in mind. I also want to preface this by saying I won't cover the basics of getting started in solo RPGs. I think that's been covered in exhaustive detail by YouTube channels who are far more articulate than I am. For example, Matt Jackson's video does a great job explaining that. I would also recommend Dungeon Dive's video. Daniel does a fantastic job breaking down the types of solo RPGs and the kind of fun that can be had with them, as well as some recommendations. Paper Dice Games made a very good video on it, and Castle Grief has a Substack post that, while not a video, is very informative. I'll put that all in the description below, as well as a bunch of extra information that might be useful to you. Last thing I want to preface is that this is system and setting agnostic. Will work for fantasy, sci-fi, modern, anything. These are more relating to the mindset of solo play. I don't primarily play journaling games, but I believe that this advice could apply to that as well. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So my first tip, because I'm apparently leaning into the YouTube clickbait nonsense, is kill perfectionism. Solo RPGs are a creative hobby. It is a creative process. Like any creative process, it's iterative. Actually doing the thing is key. Now, what do I mean by doing? There's a saying in our hobby, which is that prep is play, and I really agree with that, so I'll elaborate a bit further. Reading a book, that's prep, still play. Thinking about your last adventure, that's still play. What I mean is when overthinking gets in the way or becomes a source of fear for you to get started or to continue doing what you're doing. A good way to kind of figure this out is if you're trying to look for the perfect tool or the perfect books or try to figure out a process for the perfect session without actually testing out those tools, those books, or doing a session. Perfection in this kind of thing doesn't really exist. In most things it doesn't, but in this particularly so. Because solo RPGs are very personal. They are far more personal than group RPGs because you're the only one playing. You're fine-tuning it for yourself. Overthinking and perfectionism can lead to you stressing yourself out and make you not want to do this hobby that should be enjoyable. Also, all the tips from this list are from me actually sitting down to play and figuring out how to improve my fun at the table. So that's a big one, killing perfectionism. My second tip is to customize your experience. So I did mention not to overthink things and to start doing, but once you actually start doing and you get a few sessions in, it's important to figure out what you like and what you dislike. As I said, solo RPGs are very personal. You're the only person at the table, right? So you want to make it as fun as you can for yourself and make sure that that experience is catered towards you. What I find helps with this is essentially like writing notes down, not journaling out the actual session itself, but like figuring out what you liked about the session, what you disliked, stuff like that. This can also lead to you making your own tools and procedures, which is very useful. So these notes can become quite robust. Solitary Depths is a book that I wrote, and it was essentially a product of the notes that I took while playing Merkborg. Stuff that I thought could be improved, procedures that I thought could be elaborated on, stuff that I thought could be useful for a solo game. I just wrote all of that down and that ended up going into the book. But it doesn't have to be that robust. It can just be you figuring out that you like a certain setting or that you like a certain set of tables, that something is particularly useful to you. But whatever it is, write that down. Think about group sessions for RPGs, right? when you're running those games, or at least when I'm running them, I almost always ask feedback from my players. I want to improve as a game master, and I want to make an experience that's more enjoyable for them. So it applies doubly so if you're a GM and a player. You have to figure out something that works for you, and this is key. Not for someone on Reddit, not for some guy on YouTube doing an actual play. You need to figure out what works for you. So those were my first two tips, and those are really the more important ones. The next three tips are going to be a bit more subjective and a bit less important. But I wanted to put all the important information up front first. So that being said, my third tip will be to limit your tools. Too many books, too many oracles, too many tables can be overwhelming. I have several videos on top generators and stuff, but I think it's important to note that when I'm actually playing, I try to limit my books down. And I think it's easier to build from a base foundation. So start with simple tools and a simple oracle, then just add as you need to. Perplexing Ruins' solo sheet is perfect for this. I'll also put it in the description. I think that's a good start, and maybe just a simple oracle. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't experiment. You should. You should try out new tools. You should be trying out new things. But during the same session, limiting your tools down can help manage your cognitive load while playing, prevent you from getting overwhelmed. And I think being overwhelmed can kind of put a halt to sessions, kind of slow things down. And at least for me, I find that that is something that can kill sessions. So that will be my advice. Start simple and ramp it up as much as you need. Find your sweet spot for like how many tools you want. My fourth tip is to consider your environment. I think setting the atmosphere is very important for solo RPGs. Having a distraction-free zone is important, like Matt Jackson described. I think we can take that one step further. Think about the conditions around your play. Think about the tools that you're using. If you're using physical tools, what's the setup like? Is it clean? Is it cluttered? What works for you? If you're using a digital workflow, are you using Google Docs? Are you using Obsidian? So, like have that organized and that can streamline stuff. But that extends even further than that, right? So like music. I know some people prefer not to have music when they're playing and prefer to focus in completely on the experience. I was talking to Alex T of Black Oaf Entertainment, and he mentioned that when he plays, he doesn't have music in the background usually. He likes to focus entirely on the thing in front of him. I switch back and forth. I usually like listening to quite a bit of Dungeon Synth. Hemat the Catastrophe, I think that's how you say it. I'll put a link in the description. But they have fantastic Dungeon Synth soundtracks. But, ambient music or sci-fi music, if that suits what you're playing, can be incredibly helpful for getting you into the zone. The last thing I consider is when you're actually doing your solo RPG. I have a bit more leeway because I work as a commission artist. I do get tired at night, so I, have some time in the afternoon to play sometimes. I'm not saying schedule everything out, play when you want to, but if you're struggling with the first tip, which is to not overthink it and just start, it might be useful to kind of like have some time to yourself. Okay, so my last tip, and this one is really quite personal. But I have had this issue for quite a long time getting into solo RPGs. I liken myself as a magpie, kind of flitting from one thing to another, from one adventure to the next, and I never finish anything. I have several solo RPG series that I didn't bring to a satisfying conclusion. And I wanted to let you know that it's okay to have small, completable adventures. One session, two sessions, maybe three sessions. Think about group campaigns, right? Especially ones that use adventures. In the past, at least old school modules, they released them as small little adventures that can be completed in a few sessions. But that's not the campaign. The campaign is far greater reaching than that. But those modules and completing those modules actually gives a sense of accomplishment. It sets a milestone. And it makes players have this sense that they are making palpable progression. Not just a bit at a time, but they finish something significant. I think that's even more important when it comes to solo RPG play. So my recommendation is this, especially if you find my situation familiar. Have short adventures, finish them, and then you can play as a different character. Or you can play as the same character with some time passed, but finish a certain goal that you have in mind. Or fail it, but have it be a chapter, right? Having different characters does not mean that everything is disjointed. You can place them in the same persistent campaign world. You can play as like a Viking raiding villages in one session. You can play as a knight finishing quests in another. You can play as an anti-cleric like I've been doing, and have some kind of unholy crusade. And eventually they may interact, they may not, but they can be all part of the same world. And I think that's a very satisfying thing to do, world building. It's a large part, at least for me, of why I find this hobby so enjoyable. As an aside, I think that this is one of the unique benefits of solo games. It is quite hard to find a group that has players that are willing to, after a few sessions, switching to a different kind of character for the sake of world building. If you have players like that, that's great. That's fantastic. I think I was having this conversation with Caustic, one of my viewers. Fantastic artist, by the way. But anyway, Caustic told me that he has players like that. But I think in general, in group campaigns, people tend to want to see their characters through from one adventure to the next. So I think this is kind of unique to solo games, and I think that if, like me, you have basically attention span problems, maybe a persistent campaign world will help you with that. So those are my 5 tips. But yeah, like I said, this works for me, but it's highly personal. I'd be very interested to hear what tips you have. Tell me in the comments below. And if you can, since I've already passed into YouTuber territory, like and subscribe. It helps the channel out. I hope this helped you, and I hope you have a good day. Take care.